Imagine this. You're home alone. The house is quiet, maybe a little too quiet. You're waiting on a pizza, watching TV, not expecting anything unusual. But then, the knock at the door doesn't feel right. The man on the other side looks off. He stares at you a little too long, asks one question that freezes you in place. Are you alone here? That's how one of the scariest nights of a teenager's life began. And the deeper you look into it, the more disturbing it becomes. It was the summer of 2007. A 14-year-old boy had the house to himself for the night. His parents had gone out, his siblings were away, and it was supposed to be an easy, stress-free evening. He settled in with his PlayStation 2, switching between Grand Theft Auto and Need for Speed, the kind of comfort gaming any teen would lose hours in. Around 7 p.m., he called in a pizza order to the local shop. Nothing unusual. When the driver finally showed up, the boy opened the door without thinking twice. But what he saw immediately set off alarm bells in the back of his mind. The man standing at the door wasn't the friendly, chatty kind of delivery guy you'd expect. He looked rough, disheveled, and his eyes scanned past the boy into the house itself, like he was looking for something or someone. When the teen handed over the money, the driver paused. His voice was low, almost probing when he asked, "You home alone?" The question came out casual, but it felt anything but normal. The boy laughed nervously and muttered something about his dad being upstairs. The driver didn't push further. He just handed over the pizza, gave a strange little smirk, and left. But the feeling he left behind in that house was heavy, the kind of unease that makes you check the locks twice. For the next few hours, the boy tried to shake it off. He ate his pizza, played his games, and did his best to convince himself it was nothing. But by 10 p.m., when the glow of the TV was the only light in the room, a new sound broke the silence. A knock at the front door. He froze. His parents weren't supposed to be home yet. He wasn't expecting anyone else. He crept toward the door, heart pounding, and called out, "Who is it?" Silence. He peered through the peephole, but no one was there. He swallowed hard, double-checked the lock, and backed away. A few minutes later, another knock. This time, softer, almost playful. The boy's hand shook as he pulled the blinds back on a nearby window, just in time to see a shadow moving quickly out of sight. Minutes felt like hours. Every creak of the old house made him jump. And then, around 11, it happened. The unmistakable sound of the back door being forced open. The crack of wood. The shuffle of footsteps across the kitchen floor. Someone was inside. The boy ran upstairs, his heart slamming against his ribs, and locked himself in his bedroom. He grabbed his phone and dialed 911, whispering to the operator as quietly as possible. But the intruder was already climbing the stairs. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until they stopped right outside his room. The doorknob rattled once. Then again, slowly, methodically, like the man was savoring the moment. The boy pressed his back against the wall, tears welling in his eyes, trying not to make a sound. And then, sirens in the distance. The knob stopped turning. Heavy footsteps retreated down the hall. Then a slam echoed through the house as the intruder bolted out the back. When the police arrived, they swept the house from top to bottom. The back door was hanging off its hinges. The lock splintered. No one was inside, but there were muddy footprints leading in and out, proof that the boy hadn't imagined it. The officers asked him if he'd noticed anyone strange earlier that night, and immediately, his mind went back to that delivery driver. The question, the smirk, the way he'd looked past him into the house. When his parents got home, shaken and panicked, they called the pizza place the boy had ordered from. But when they asked about the driver, the manager said something that made the whole situation even more chilling. No one on staff that night matched the boy's description. And according to the records, the pizza hadn't even been delivered by one of their drivers. The boy never saw that man again. And to this day, he still doesn't know who actually came to his door that night, or what would have happened if the police hadn't shown up in time. That night left him with scars that still follow him into adulthood. But as terrifying as it wasn't the only time an innocent knock on the door turned into something much darker. After the pizza delivery nightmare, you might think these kind of encounters are rare, unlucky accidents that only happen once in a while, but the truth is, they happen far more often than people realize. And the next story takes us out of the suburbs and into the quiet, remote stretches of Idaho, where a teenager discovered just how dangerous isolation can be. It was the spring of 2013. A 17-year-old boy had just moved with his family to a quiet, rural town in Idaho. Their new home sat at the edge of a forest, miles away from the nearest neighbor. It was supposed to be a fresh start, a safer, calmer life away from the noise of the city. At first, it was perfect. He spent his days helping his dad chop wood, exploring trails, and walking the family's German shepherd, Max. With no nearby friends, he entertained himself with long hikes and endless hours online. The peace and quiet felt almost therapeutic. But as he would soon learn, peace can sometimes hide danger just beneath the surface. One night, he sat in the living room scrolling on his phone while Max dozed by his feet. Out of nowhere, Max lifted his head, ears perked, eyes locked on the window. The boy followed the dog's gaze and froze. Outside, pressed against the glass, was the pale face of a man. He wasn't wearing a mask, wasn't trying to hide. He was smiling, and in his hand, reflecting faintly in the moonlight, was a long knife. The boy gasped, stumbling backward. The man just stood there, grinning, tapping the knife gently against the window pane like he was knocking politely. By the time the boy grabbed his phone to call his dad, the figure had disappeared into the darkness of the trees. For a while, nothing else happened. His parents thought maybe it was just a prank, or that he had imagined it entirely. But then, the tapping started. Every night around 2 a.m., faint knocks would echo against windows. Sometimes it was a living room, sometimes a kitchen, sometimes his bedroom window while he tried to sleep. Every time he worked up the courage to peek outside, all he saw were footprints in the dirt, circling the house in wide, deliberate patterns. Max would growl, pacing restlessly, nose pressed to the glass. But no matter how quickly the boy ran outside with a flashlight, there was never anyone there, just silence, and the sense that someone was watching, just out of sight. Weeks went by like this, until one night, things escalated. The boy was brushing his teeth before bed when Max suddenly went berserk, snarling, barking, and throwing himself at the back door. The boy sprinted to the kitchen, just in time to see the same man standing in the yard. This time, he wasn't smiling. He wasn't knocking. He was just standing there, gripping the knife tighter, staring directly at the boy through the glass. The boy's father burst into the room, shouting as he reached for the shotgun by the door. But before he could even open it, the man bolted into the woods, moving faster than either of them thought possible. They searched the property that night with police, but found nothing. Only a trail of footprints that vanished deep into the trees. The stalker was never caught. And to this day, the boy still remembers that smile pressed against the glass, the sound of a knife tapping on his window in the dead of night. What's disturbing is how many of these encounters never end with an arrest or even an explanation. Sometimes, people vanish back into the night, like they were never there at all. But when a group of college students rented a secluded cabin in the woods, they discovered that not every intruder simply disappears. If you thought the Idaho stalker was terrifying, wait until you hear what happened to a group of friends who thought a weekend in the woods would be the perfect escape. They weren't expecting danger, let alone a nightmarish encounter that would change the way they looked at cabins forever. It was the fall of 2018. 4 college students, 2 couples, rented a cabin deep in the Appalachian Mountains. They wanted a break from school, a place where no one could bother them, just hiking, laughter, and a little partying. The cabin itself was rustic, perched near a lake, with old wood creaking under every step. It didn't bother them. In fact, they thought it added to the charm. The first night went smoothly. They grilled food, told stories, and played music until late. But as the night dragged on, one of the friends swore he saw a shadow move past the tree line, just outside the firelight. They laughed it off. After all, it was the woods. Shadows move, animals wander, paranoia happens, right? The second night, things felt different. As they sat around the fire, faint snapping sounds echoed from the forest. Twigs breaking, leaves crunching, like footsteps circling them just out of sight. Every time they shined a flashlight into the trees, the sound stopped. Later, when they finally went inside, one of the girls swore she heard whispering outside her window. Not wind, not the trees. Actual voices. But when her boyfriend checked, there was nothing there. They laughed it off again, but unease lingered like smoke in the air. Around 3 a.m., just as everyone was dozing off, came a loud knock on the cabin door. All 4 of them shot upright. Who would be out here at this hour? The knocking grew louder, harder, until it echoed through the entire cabin. One of the guys grabbed a baseball bat and approached the door cautiously. When he asked who it was, the knocking stopped. Silence. He opened the peephole and froze. Standing on the porch were 3 figures. Motionless, dressed in dark, tattered clothing, their faces hidden behind masks that looked handmade, crude, stitched together, almost like burlap sacks. The tallest one tilted his head slowly, as if studying him through the peephole. The guys stumbled back, heart racing. The figures didn't knock again. They just stood there, silent, staring, for hours. By dawn, the masked strangers were gone. The group tried to convince themselves it had been some twisted prank, maybe locals messing with outsiders. They decided to pack up and leave that day. But before they could, things escalated. While loading the car, they found deep scratches etched into the cabin's wooden walls. Carved word that read, "We see you." That night, their last before leaving, the knocking returned. This time at every window, every door, all at once. The sound surrounded them, relentless, like a storm of fists pounding in rhythm. They huddled together in the living room, praying it would stop. And then the back door burst open. The tallest masked figure stepped inside, followed by the others. The friends screamed, scattering in every direction. The baseball bat connected with one intruder's shoulder, but he didn't flinch. They moved silently, deliberately, cornering the group. The students fought, throwing anything they could grab. Somehow, one of them managed to shove a stranger into a wall hard enough to knock his mask loose. For a split second, they saw his face. It wasn't some deranged stranger. It was a local man, ordinary, someone they might have passed in town earlier that week. The group bolted to the front door and into the woods, running until their lungs burned. They didn't stop until they reached a ranger station miles away. When they returned with authorities, the cabin was empty. No intruders. No masks, only the words carved into the wood, "Deeper this time, come back soon." The police brushed it off as a cruel prank. But the students never forgot that night. The way the strangers moved, the silence, the message carved into the walls. They left the cabin behind, but the memory followed them long after college. And here's the unsettling truth. Across the country, in isolated areas, reports of masked figures terrorizing cabins pop up more often than you'd think. Sometimes it's written off as kids causing trouble. Other times, there's no explanation at all. It's easy to dismiss stories like these as urban legends, campfire tales designed to scare. But when you hear about what happened in the final story, you'll realize some nightmares are all too real. And sometimes the scariest part isn't what happens to you, but what you never find out. The cabin horror might seem like the ultimate nightmare, but the most haunting stories aren't always about what you see. Sometimes it's about what's left behind, the silence, the questions, and the chilling realization that you may never know the truth. And that's exactly what happened in the case of a disappearance that still baffles investigators to this day. Section 15, a weekend trip gone wrong. It was the summer of 2005. A young woman named Claire decided to take a solo road trip through the Pacific Northwest. She loved nature photography and wanted to spend the weekend capturing the beauty of hidden waterfalls and mountain trails. She kept in touch with her family, texting them updates as she drove from spot to spot. Her last message was short and simple. Found a great trailhead. No service after this point. Will call when I'm back. She was never heard from again. 2 days later, rangers discovered her car parked at a small gravel lot near a trail entrance. Nothing inside suggested foul play. Her backpack and camera gear were gone, presumably taken with her on the hike. The only odd detail, on the dusty back windshield, a finger had traced the words, "Don't look." Her family swore she would never have written something like that herself. Investigators searched the surrounding woods for weeks, combing through miles of terrain with dogs and helicopters. Not a single trace of Claire was found. Months later, a hiker stumbled upon something strange wedged between rocks near a creek bed not far from the trailhead. It was Claire's camera. Somehow, it had survived water damage, and several of the photos were recoverable. The first few images were exactly what her family expected. Shots of waterfalls, wildflowers, sweeping forest landscapes. But the last 3 pictures sent chills down everyone's spine. The first was a blurry photo of trees at night, as if taken in a hurry. The second showed the same woods, but this time in the background, faintly illuminated, stood what looked like a figure. Tall, thin, unmistakably human. The final picture was almost entirely black, except for a flash of white in the corner. Possibly a face, far too close to the lens. Investigators could never confirm what the images truly showed. But one thing was clear. Claire hadn't been alone out there. Over the years, theories spread like wildfire. Some believed she had gotten lost, that the photos were nothing more than her disoriented attempts to use the camera as a flashlight. Others were convinced she had encountered someone out there, maybe a hermit, maybe something worse. Online forums dissected every detail of the final photos, claiming to see multiple figures lurking in the shadows. Her case remains unsolved. No body was ever recovered. No suspects identified. Just an abandoned car, a chilling message scrawled in dust, and 3 haunting photographs that only raise more questions. And here's the part that makes the story stick with people. Claire wasn't the only one. Over the past few decades, dozens of hikers and campers have vanished in similar circumstances across the Pacific Northwest. Their cars found, their gear left behind, their trails ending abruptly in silence. Some believe it's coincidence. Others think there's something darker hiding deep in those forests, something that doesn't want to be found. From pizza deliveries gone wrong to mass strangers in cabins, and from stalkers in Idaho to disappearances that remain unsolved, one thing is clear. The scariest stories aren't the ones told around a campfire. They're the ones that happen to real people, in real places, without warning. And maybe the most terrifying part? Most of the time, there's no explanation. Just questions. Just silence. Just the unsettling knowledge that sometimes danger doesn't need a reason. It only needs opportunity. So the next time you find yourself alone, whether it's answering a late-night knock, walking a quiet trail, or renting a secluded cabin, remember these stories, because the nightmare doesn't always end when the story does.